Evening all. How we all doing? Nice to see the usual faces, getting in early, as always. Yes, it only seems like 24 hours since I was last on stream. It's quite nice doing 2 in a row, to be honest. So we will be doing some Caravella stuff this evening. And I was thinking it might be nice to get some of the hardware actually working. I might see if I can get the RCS working once we've got power going to stuff. And I'm thinking about doing some of the UI work maybe, but I want to move away from using Unreal's widget system and build a mesh-based UI. So literally everything on the UI is going to be layered static meshes. So we do lots and lots of 2D planes with geometry-based details. So we shouldn't have any texture VRAM usage at all for any of the UIs. We're doing a bunch of optimization to reduce that as much as possible with the widgets, but having as many widgets as we do, like hundreds of them all over the ship, if they're all visible and loaded, we're talking gigs of VRAM to store all those textures. So making it mesh-based completely removes that problem altogether. So we'll give that a whirl, see how much time we have left at the end. Hey Max, how you doing? Yep, Caravella today. I had a quick look at this earlier. I was seeing if I could get the tessellation working. As you can see, it's kind of working but not. So the fact that it's pixelated means that it's trying to tessellate those pixels and make them 3D. So it's doing that bit of the job, but not actually making them 3D. So I need to do some more work on that, but hopefully it's something simple that I'm not ticking. But let's save all of that, and we need to open up the Caravella, which I've not opened for at least a week by the looks of things. How do I add this to my favorites? It's probably staring me in the face, but I can't see it. So I want to add it to here. Well, I'll figure that out another time. Yeah, the kittens are doing the very, very, very best to destroy the office. Like literally 2 minutes ago, just before starting the stream, they knocked the little casket off my shelf that contains my old cat Pip, and we were unable to open the casket. We thought it was like glued shut, and it turns out it does open, and the kittens opened it. Unfortunately, Pip's ashes were in a little bag which is sealed, so that could have been a lot worse with ashes all over the carpet. But they managed to open the box, so that opens now. But yeah, they are trying to break and trash everything, as tiny cats are wont to do. No worries, Firstus. Say hello to your wife for us. So we need to bring the holo display in properly as well. We need to replace the fake temporary power with some actual power. So if we bring in an actual reactor and get that actually ticking and sending power out, of course that is going to mean also setting up the tanks as well, which is also going to mean the pumps and the chillers. So we're going to have to do the whole coolant loop. We're going to have to get some starter capacitors running somewhere. If not there, then maybe underneath. Yeah, but we'll start generating power. And for now, I'll just copy the assets from the Magellan, just so that we've got things working. It would also be nice with the cabling to, let me zoom over here. So I want to automatically pick up connected devices by which thing they're overlapping. So the cable itself is a spline, and then there's just a static mesh at each end. But we can do an overlap check on the static mesh to see what else it's overlapping. So if it's overlapping a plug of the opposite gender, then we can do the logical connection between those two devices, or two cables even, without having to go in and manually specify what the cables are going where. It means that authoring it is going to be a lot quicker and less prone to human error, because we won't induce typos and things. I can imagine, Caesar, yeah. Okay, so what levels do we have? So on the Magellan, we've got all the power infrastructure separated out per deck. And I guess we kind of need to do the same with this one, so that when we do the loading screen, we load it in layers rather than having all the power systems appear all at once. Yeah, I think we will do that. So we need to make a few more levels for that. So framework, interior. Yeah, so let's make a few blank levels. So we need Caravella, deck 1, power. Oh, I guess we call it infrastructure. Because there's no reason why we can't also add the HVAC systems and the pipes and everything else onto the same level. Although, actually, saying that, if we want to do cutaway diagrams where we're doing cutaways to certain systems, it would be a lot easier if they were on their own level. So perhaps we will split those. So yeah, let's make that one power. And then we'll do another one for plumbing, another one for HVAC, etc., etc. Deck 2 power. Deck 3 power. Deck 4 power. Do we already have a deck 4 power? Is that where the reactor is? No, apparently not. So do we even have that on here? Oh, we do. What's coming from that? we want to add 1, 2, and 3. So I will be completely replacing these with much better versions for this particular ship. Need to re-export the framework actually, so we've got the room in place. But for now, as a placeholder, so we've got 1, 2, 3, and 4. And they'll extend all the way back as far as we can to here. Yeah, fingers crossed we'll get a dev build out. I'll just space them equally for now. Making sure I had the right widget and everything set up for it, because it's not showing that on there, but I'm sure it will once it's running. We need a reactor now, and this is going to have obviously completely the wrong mesh, being as it's that one. To be honest, it's an interesting example of scale, isn't it? Like the Magellan's reactor isn't that much smaller, or bigger rather, than the Caravella one. It's going to get bigger, but for now it's not actually that much bigger, which is interesting. Right, so we need to change the mesh and everything. So the base we can just clear. Okay, so this one's made up of lots of different bits. I think what I might do is make maybe a more generic reactor class, where we can change the scale of the reactor and use that on the Caravella, and actually use the volume of the reaction chamber as our measure for how much power it's outputting. Yep, the Friday streams are my favourite streams. I get to just go mad with stuff. So if we do a scaled version of the reactor, so we've got the various bits of the reactor as separate pieces, and ideally we want to do most of this as just a solid mesh, I think. And things like the cap and the base, we don't need those. These are some of the original test connectors that I did, which I was using for overlaps at one point. Okay, so we get rid of them, and then we'll replace that with the Caravella one. Which naturally is going to be somewhere else. Yeah, so let's re-export that in the right place. Well, I can if you want. Space dating. Oh, Darren, thank you. Very much appreciated. No, we're still on 5.6 at the moment. What, 561? What am I looking for? Caravella. Yeah. I think that's what Darren's after, because he donated 20 right after suggesting it, so it's going to have to happen now. We want this separately. So ideally we need to set the origin point right in the middle. Because then we can position it accordingly. Yeah, and it doesn't help that the like the blue axis, which is supposed to be up and down, is currently left and right, so that's not helping us any either. Ah, Sophie, thank you. We have a lot of support for the space dating sim tonight. Just kidding. We're not really going to do a space dating sim. Right, so that should have centralized all of that. So that's already a component, which means we need to then grab our little widget in the middle. Paste that there. Group them together. And then reset the origin point of the group. It should match the components. So when we export the mesh, it should export at the world origin. We hope. Why don't we have a reactor? Madden, thank you. Right now, I'm being fueled by Morrison's sparkling water because it's got no carbs in it, which is great for my keto diet. And it tastes nice. Oh, Max, thank you. You guys are being super, super generous tonight. Yeah, not sponsored by Morrison's. If we were going to get sponsored, I'd want it to be Midhogger? Yeah, no, Nidhogger. The Nidhogger company that makes mead. Nidhogger. Difficult to say. Oh, Sophie, that's awesome. Sorry, I only just spotted that. Very cool. We wish you all the best. Oh, I had a hardware folder already. That would be where it went. Well, we'll use the test one for now. Right, so that should be at the world origin, which means that should also be at the world origin. Which means all this lot needs moving. Can we not just move stuff all at once? No, we can. Good. That. Actually, if we reset all that to the middle. Oh, good luck, Madman. It's a worthwhile pursuit. Okay, that will do. Let's just move the widget somewhere more sensible. Where'd it go? I knew I put a reactor here somewhere. Or did I delete it? No, I must have deleted it. So in order to position this exactly where it needs to be, we can measure the distance in SketchUp to the world origin. So if we take that, we know that it will be zero centimeters vertically and 1800 horizontally. So that can be 0, and that would be 1800. There we go, so that's now exactly in the middle. And we've got a UI which should be covered in all kinds of errors. Okay, Madman, sounds interesting. What's Claire not sharing with me? Well, she never shares chocolate with me. Thank you all. So if I recall correctly, we were going to put the aggregators, at the back here, because we were going to use those for port and starboard power. Oh, thank you, Delta. Very much appreciated. Can't remember why that one was there now. I'm sure there was a reason for it, but we'll figure that out as we go. Okay, so we have port and starboard aggregators. Yeah. I forgot I made these dynamic, so you can choose like where it puts all the various aspects of the mesh. And of course they also need moving, so yeah, there we go. So given that each one of these plugs is a separate static mesh, we should be able to use those happily for our overlap checks. And I think what we'll do is we'll maybe do the overlap check if the cable the cable ID is none or null. Obviously it's pre-populating some. Obviously the naming conventions on this are all for the Magellan, so we need to start making things a lot more generic so they can be used across any vessel. And we also need to be able to change the visual style of these devices as well. So we want them to operationally be the same for every ship. I mean, an aggregator is aggregating multiple connections it's aggregating multiple battery arrays into a single high voltage feed. So we want that to happen across every ship that has batteries, but the visual style of those boxes is obviously going to change, and the UI styles are going to change. So we want to make sure that we keep the code the same, but have lots of scope for visual changes. Obviously these ones are set up for 8 battery arrays, so we shall have to change the number of arrays we can have. Okay, so this one is not mirrored, and the ports are on that side. Actually, this needs to be deck 1, doesn't it? Deck 1 power, so that one and that one will need to be on deck 1. Okay, and then we'll stick some cables in. Fortunately, these snap because that's something I prepared earlier. So once all the battery arrays themselves are actually properly modelled, and we'll probably make them floor to ceiling, so they'll be like taking up the whole space, and then we'll have like relatively large battery units that slot into the various gaps. We need to make them big so that they're chunky, but not too big so they can't be carried around by a player. Yes. Future Dan, or past Dan, doesn't always thank future Dan, but sometimes it happens. So all of these have an in and an out power feed. So we need a distributor down here somewhere. Yeah, I was putting them there, wasn't I? So one there, just doing all of them. Wondering whether or not, for redundancy's sake, we maybe have one each side. I mean, we do have the wall space each side for that, so we could do. Let's give it a try and see. Yeah, so again, the problem we're going to have with these is these are designed for the Magellan, so they have all the ports they need, which are relevant for the Magellan. So we kind of need to make them more more versatile in terms of how many ports they have and where they are, and so on and so on. I think I added that into it. But yeah. Yeah, true. Because really each one only needs 2 outputs, one for each of the 2 battery arrays, port or starboard. So we can actually make much smaller versions of this box. And I suppose on that note, we do actually have smaller versions of it. Is that one of those ones? I think it. Yeah, because these ones are set up for corridors. Not very well, though. So is this using a generic actor, I wonder? No, okay, so they're all using this one. It's been a long time since I actually built these, so can't quite remember how I set them up. That doesn't look like one of the dynamic meshes. Yeah, that's more like it. So that would be a dynamic one. Okay, so we need a dynamic number of inputs, a dynamic number of outputs as well. What did I do way back when? So that's the box scaling. Okay, and then we should have interfaces. Don't need to do that anymore. Okay, so that's just setting up our culling stuff. That's just changing the mesh. Ah, there we go. Right, so we're setting the initial location followed by an offset, and then we're just putting them down there. So can we tell it how many interfaces? I would have thought I would have set that up. Or not. Okay, so there's a job to do there. Rather than just assuming the location of all of the outputs, I need to have an input there for how many outputs are actually needed, and then do the same for inputs as well. And we also need up, down, and left, right for where those inputs need to go as well. Did I just break all of them? Probably so. We shall worry about that at a later date. Right, so we need... Okay, yeah, we need the whole high voltage reactor bus. But we're going to do that slightly differently. Because right now, we go in, we basically have a single cable going into a high voltage, just a distribution bus essentially for the reactor. But it's like there's a tremendous amount of power going over just a single small cable, which is kind of ridiculous. So we need to make sure that we have a distribution cap on the reactor, where when we pull the energy from the reactor, we are distributing directly from the energy harvesting hardware on the reactor, so we're not having to cram it all down a single cable and then have a separate box for performing that function, which means we can send out feeds of varying degrees to things that need it. Case in point, for the Caravella, we can have super high voltage feeds going up into the engine pods that won't need to go through a distribution box first. So on our reactor hardware, we're going to need the ability to have multiple outputs, which also has to be present on the UI as well. Yeah, because when we do... Hang on, where's the reactor gone? Yeah, when we do the internal bus, we're going to need an output bus as well. So when we hit supply, we need to see all of the output ports and where they're going. So maybe we need a fourth UI on here for displaying that. Maybe even split that up into two separate screens. So we'll have a screen for controlling the reactor itself, with the magnetic coils, the fuel and everything else, and then have the electrical bus for the reactor separately, to keep that physically separate from the actual reactor controls. And that allows us then to have multiple cables just sprouting out of the end of the reactor. So on that note, if we grab a couple more cables, make these ones fairly chunky. Suppose we'll stick them up there because that's where they'll eventually end up. Yeah, so these cables will come out of the reactor into this box, which will then send its cables up these decks through to here and on this side as well, and then that's what will ultimately feed these. So we'll have two cables each side, which will be these ones. Yeah, so that one's the wrong way around. Or is it? No, that one's right. Oh, I see, we've got the same plug on both ends, which makes no sense. I think it was in on the left and out on the right, if I recall. We'll find out when I turn it on. Okay, so for now, we'll use the manual way of connecting cables together rather than relying on overlaps, because otherwise I'm going to have to actually move the cables around. Make sure it's facing the right way, because it's, yeah. So dangerous end is the female end, so we're not having exposed pins. So yeah, ultimately we'll extend that across and power stuff. So this would be feed reactor feed reactor battery started. That one would be port. And then the upstream device would just be reactor. And this is why we will be better off if we've got overlaps, because otherwise you can just imagine how much human error creeps in with having to put in cable names and then having the same cable name on this device as well. So our upstream cable, where are we? Which is interface A, needs to be that. Yeah, because we have alphabetized interfaces for inputs and numerical interfaces for outputs, just so we don't get confused. Although the system is already very confusing. Yeah, true that, CSI. Yeah, like I said on the last stream I was doing this, we'll look at arcing distances, and then we'll scale the rubber sheath based on what the arcing distance is for the voltage. The battery feeds won't be super high voltage. We'll probably do either 240 or maybe 1 kilovolt. Obviously we need to keep raising voltages in order to keep the amperage down. Otherwise the amperage gets too high and everything melts. Welcome back, Frosters. Unicorn, yes, the shuttles are going to be based on the is it Dream Chaser? I think it was Dream Chaser. Yeah, Dream Chaser. So Sierra Nevada's Dream Chaser is very cool. Obviously, we're not going to copy it exactly, but that's the kind of thing we're looking at for shuttles. We want something that is compact, it's aerodynamic, it makes sense as a actual space plane, and it's going to have like proper RCS, proper thrusters, and it's not going to be a magic box like you get in Star Trek that doesn't have any visible thrusters or anything. It's all going to be very much proper technology and proper hardware. But yeah, something like this, and the probes will be very similar as well. Yes, you'll be able to land on planets. In fact, in the last stream, yesterday, we were demonstrating exactly how we'll do that. Might even have one here, actually. Do I have a surface? No, I don't. hopefully now. See, I'm certainly going to try and get it powered up. Obviously there's a lot of infrastructure stuff that we need to build and plug in order to get all this working. Yeah, exactly that, Festus. Right, what are these connected to? Let's make sure I'm not deleting something that's needed. Right, so we'll get rid of them. This is our, at least for now, our fuel and coolant room. It needs to be extended below the ship to make the tanks bigger. But it'll do for now. Which means we need tankage. See, this is going to be the interesting one. So we'll scale these down. We'll just do little diddy tanks for now. Okay, so we need 3 commodity tanks, and we need pipes and valves, we need chillers, so we need 2 of them. Actually, no, we don't need 3 of them. So let's stick a bunch of chillers in there, and we need some pumps. Pumps don't have models yet, which is why they look like that. I think I did it so that we're going to have the, yeah, we'll have the input side this side, and then the return side this side. And then we'll have the power probably coming out the top and the sides, and then the fuel and coolant coming out the bottom. Yep, easily done. I'll build proper tanks for this room, so we won't reuse the Magellan ones. So we've got the pumps, we've got the chillers. Now we just need to do the pipe work between them. Yes, these are all nanite assets, as you can probably tell, because of the high polyness of them. Like, right down to the bolts. Right, So we also need a source for fuel and coolant. Right now they're just balls, but this will actually be the collection hardware underneath. But for now, this is just a proxy for that. Now all the assets are made in SketchUp. So I build the assets in SketchUp. If they are like a super high poly mesh like these ones, then generally I would have used subdivision to do them. Otherwise they're just basic geometry. Like I wouldn't have used subdivision on this to build the asset. It's just a basic cylinder. But something like this, well, more specifically, getting these bits here looking nice, I would have used subdivision on this to get it all nice and smooth, because it's well, it's a pain in the ass otherwise. Yes, there are many kitties behind me doing what kitties do. Oh, I've got it locked to 30. Otherwise my fans go mad. I mean, if you want to see what actually... Oh, kitties! What it actually looks like. So bearing in mind I'm on a 4090, so obviously that helps. So if I go to graphics options and we set that to ultra, so yeah, just about scraping 60, and this is with everything turned on, including Lumen and everything. If I turn down volumetric fog by 1 notch, we turn off Lumen. Oh, actually, would help if I turned off VSync, wouldn't it? Turn off VSync. Uncap the FPS. Right, there we go. So, what are we getting there? 70-ish. Yeah, so no global illumination. Let's take it back to TAA. Yeah, 90 odd. So the thing with Nanite is that you have to optimize for Nanite. So Nanite isn't designed for like single plane meshes with masked materials on them, because you get quad overdraw. Well, it's not quad overdraw, it's just plain overdraw with Nanite. And the kitten climbing up my side. Yeah, so to overdraw can be a real issue, and the thing with Nanite is it does its culling based on its own groupings. So if you have large geometry, which is like a large low poly face, like a massive brick wall that's got just 2 polys, then it can't cull anything because it needs to cull by clusters. So if you were to look at the Nanite view, you'd see that all of this is made of clusters. So when you have like these wall panels here, these, because I haven't finished modeling them or smoothing them, there'll be solid faces, which means it doesn't cull properly. Whereas if you have higher detail meshes, actually if you run downstairs a minute, Jonesy chilling on the stairs. So some of the more finished areas like this, where we've got higher poly geometry, like with bolts and everything, Nanite can cull that really efficiently because it's dealing with much more clusters. So it's culling based on clusters rather than geometry itself. So yeah. So you need to build your geometry with Nanite in mind, and in mind of how Nanite actually works. So a lot of people complaining about poor performance with Nanite aren't doing Nanite properly. You know, they're not optimizing their meshes for that. They've got like overdraw issues, and they're using lots of masked materials. Like using masked foliage will just destroy Nanite performance. Whereas in 5.7, of course, we've now got Nanite foliage and Nanite voxelized foliage, which is really brilliant and really performant. So yeah, you definitely have to work with it rather than against it. Oh, I think, yeah, I think people complaining about performance probably are talking more about Lumen. Because if I turn Lumen back on, see, I don't get much of a hit, so yeah, like, if any, to be fair. But I am streaming right now, and I'm running the engine at the same time, so it's not going to be as good as it normally would be. If I were to, hang on, where are we? Let's just pop over to save that planet a minute. Because obviously lighting, yeah, plays a part in this as well. By Earth. So yeah, when the ship's moving, obviously it's now constantly invalidating the virtual shadow map cache, because obviously the sun's moving, which means the direction light's moving, which means it's constantly invalidating the cache now. So you'll find that the performance is worse when the ship's flying around. But yeah, it's about as performant as we could make it, I think. I mean, normally I get around about 100 frames a second with Nanite and Lumen turned on. Only managing about 60-ish right now. Ow. Cat. Yeah. If I just jump down here to the deck with all the higher poly stuff on it. Yeah, so this is where most of the high poly stuff lives. And again, I'm getting 60, 70 FPS on max. I think the lowest performance area is probably about here. And yeah, it's still tickling about 70 FPS. And this is without DLSS or anything. Obviously, if you lower the render scale, so DLSS is like 60%, isn't it? So obviously, you know, frame rate goes up significantly, although not for me right now because I've got a bunch of other stuff running. But generally speaking, you lower the render scale, it will increase the FPS considerably. Yeah, it's more because I've got the engine running and a bunch of other stuff. With nothing else running, I usually get about 100 FPS with everything maxed out on this machine. And the game is definitely GPU limited. It's not. I mean, we get barely any hit on the CPU, and it's the lighting mostly. Megalights helps a little bit, but not a huge amount, to be honest. No, I'm not using DLSS because it causes issues with the UIs. So with DLSS enabled, we get really bad smearing when numbers are changing rapidly on UI screens. And I find that Unreal's built-in upscaler does a much better job at just maintaining UI consistency. And with the temporal upscaler, you can reduce the, well, you saw it just there. I mean, I reduced the screen scale to 60%, and you can't even tell the difference. I mean, you can do the same on here, although they have changed it all. Not sure where it all got moved to. Oh, here. So, where's our render scale? The UE5 UI got updated recently, and everything's moved. There we go. Right, so if I reduce that to say 60%, so you can tell that there's a little bit of aliasing on the UI there, but on the geometry itself, you can't really tell that we've reduced that at all. Set that back up to 88, which is what it was. And really the only difference is just slightly crisper UI. Again, the geometry doesn't really look any different. So yes, I would recommend using Nanite if you're not using masked materials a lot. So if you've got masked grass, then it's going to hurt it. If you're using fully 3D geometry driven grass, and especially if you're using the new Nanite foliage, then yes, absolutely use Nanite. And the thing to remember is that things like virtual shadow maps are designed to work with Nanite. So you get less performance with virtual shadows if you're using non-Nanite meshes. So Epic is moving towards the kind of like a fully virtualized solution. So you've got Nanite virtual geometry, you've got virtual shadows, you've got virtual textures. So everything's being virtualized at every step of the way. And we've got all that turned on for this. So because we're using virtual textures, virtual geometry, virtual shadows, it really keeps like VRAM footprints low, and you can have like literally multiple gigabytes worth of textures in a scene, and it's only using like 100 mega VRAM. It's mad how it achieves it, but because it's just virtually streaming everything, you can get away with it. But Nanite's one of those things where if you have relatively low poly assets and not very many of them, then traditional LODs are going to be more performant because Nanite has a base cost in the same way that Lumen has a base cost. But once you get past the base cost of running Nanite, then it kind of unlocks virtually unlimited poly counts. So you can have super high poly assets in the millions, and the cost doesn't go up from the base cost. So as long as you're happy with the base cost, then it really frees you up from a pipeline perspective, because all of a sudden you can author assets a lot more quickly, and have a lot more in the scene. And this is one of the issues that we had, which is why we're using Nanite, is that it lowers draw calls, again, by virtualizing everything. So yeah, poly count and draw call limits are no longer that much of a concern if you're using Nanite properly and you're optimizing Nanite properly. And yeah, I would highly recommend looking up clustering and how Nanite manages its clusters, because that's the key to keeping everything running performant. Because if you look at clusters, so you can see the base geometry here has no clusters, so it can't cull anything behind, say, this green bit here, because all of this is one solid cluster, so it can't cull behind it. Whereas these meshes are much higher poly, so you can see there's a much higher density of clusters. So any part of this mesh that's behind this is culled, because it's culling it per cluster. So that little blue sort of cyan cluster there, if I move that across like that, that cluster is now not being drawn. So you're actually culling a piece of the mesh rather than the whole mesh. And that's how Nanite works across the board. It's cluster-based culling. So because of that, if your mesh has a lot of clusters, then it can cull more of the mesh than if it didn't have very many clusters. Like down here, this is obviously a single face, so culling wise, you'd have to cover up this entire face in order to cull it. But yeah, it's obviously I've been delving into the optimization of this quite a bit, and it's Nanite's just one of those things where it's kind of how you use it that determines how performant it is. I wouldn't say throw all the polys at everything for the sake of it. I mean, obviously Nanite handles that very well, but you need no, it's fine. It's a good question. I would say take a balanced approach for that. Like I said, because Nanite culls by cluster, the more clusters or rather the smaller the clusters are, the more of the mesh it will cull. So again, it will cull half of that mesh in the background because it's culling those clusters on the mesh rather than the whole mesh having to be occluded. That's how it manages its optimization, and also that's how it manages overdraw and stuff. Because if we go to overdraw, you can actually see the clusters being culled, and the reason we have more orange up here, so even though the meshes up here are a lot more simple, they're very, very low poly, so that culling information, the clusters are too big, so it can't cull that geometry. Whereas with these meshes, it's culling all of the tanks behind this one because they have smaller clusters, and you can see in the background here how it's culling on a per cluster basis rather than the mesh as a whole. So you want enough geometry that you have enough clusters so that Nanite can do its job, but obviously that doesn't mean make every single asset 1,000,000 polygons, because then obviously that has a RAM impact, that has a hard drive impact. Those things still need to be loaded into memory. So I would say yes, if you're going super, super high poly, definitely just do that on your hero assets, but don't make things low poly and then use them in Nanite unnecessarily. Just give Nanite stuff to work with, and then you should have less overdraw issues, because it's the overdraw that causes the problems, as I have found out by trial and error for the most part, and then learning from my mistakes, of which I make many. But yeah, hopefully that explains how to use and not to use Nanite. So I need to remember now what pipes go where, because it's been a while since I had to plumb all this in. So these guys feed these pipes, which come into the input on here. And then we have an overflow from here which comes into here, and then an output from here which goes into there. So Yeah, so I guess these ones are going to be the outputs. I suppose let's just connect them to there so that we can kind of get some visual idea of what it's coming out of. You're welcome, CSI. Now, my memory's awful, as Claire will tell you. Yeah, so these tanks are helium 4, liquid helium 4 for cooling, liquid helium 3 for fuel, and deuterium for fuel. So we are fusing helium and deuterium 3, which creates our fuel mix for the fusion reactor. And then we're cooling everything down with helium 4, because liquid helium is one of the coldest things you can have. Let's just line them up. The reason I'm overlapping these is so I can see visually which one's going where, otherwise I do get confused. Oh, thank you, Luck Dragon. Yeah, it's that realism and doing it for real that we really love, and you know, kind of what led us to start all this in the first place, because we just, you know, love the idea of just going through that thought process of, you know, if we were doing this for real, how would we do it? What hardware would we need? You know, and what jobs would that hardware need to perform? Right, so that's those 3 for each one. And YouTube has crashed as always. Yeah, megalights, they won't help you if you don't have shadows being cast. So I went through and profiled this a lot. So megalights enable you to have dynamic shadow casting lights scene wide, with practically no additional cost. That's kind of the power of megalights. If you're not casting shadows from your lights, then megalights is pointless. And do also be aware that it requires a ray tracing compatible GPU for it to work. I guess to put it into perspective, our scenes on the ship, we've got multiple hundreds of lights, like per room, all of which are casting shadows with no additional cost. That is the power of megalights. Although megalight shadows are quite smeary. If I very quickly fire this up again. Start a new mission. Oh, I forgot to select a ship now. Just park the ship outside Earth so we can have some light on the scene. Yeah, so all of these lights are all casting shadows. So you can see on the floor here you've got shadows being cast from the consoles, from the chairs. Like these little balustrade lights, they're all casting shadows, as you can see there from the shadow on the floor. You know, shadow from the railing, and that's not coming from the direction light from the sun. That's all coming from like the scene lighting. And if I come down here to B deck, you can see that all the plants here are all casting shadows from all these ceiling lights. But if we look at my character's feet as he's moving around, you can see it's quite ghosty. And if you look at the shadow being cast from the little Roomba there, you can see you get quite a smeary shadow as it's moving around. It's kind of hard to see when it's stationary, but yeah, so the shadow, ow, cat. Yeah, the shadow's quite smeary. Probably see it more clearly if I just grab something like that. I mean, it's not terrible. I mean, it depends on how much fast-moving geometry you have, but you know, you definitely get trails from moving objects. I mean, it's lovely to have shadows being cast from literally everything. But you know, it's one of those things where if you are happy to accept smeary shadows, then yeah, go for it. But of course they're free, so you know it's that balancing act, isn't it? You know, they might be smeary, but they cost nothing with megalights enabled. So it's just, you know, again, it's that balancing act. But for stationary objects, yeah, megalights are awesome. I also find the megalight shadows a little bit weird in terms of what they cast shadows on. Like they are casting shadows from the plants, obviously, and they're casting shadows from my character's feet as he's running around. But you know, as much as the light is literally, and this is a rect light above my head, we're not using emissives for lighting or anything. It's proper lights, but it's not casting like a solid shadow under my character. It's quite wishy-washy, and I haven't quite worked out why. Like, and if I stand against the wall here, you can see like the shadow from my character. It's there, but it's not very well defined, and I don't know whether that's just a skeletal mesh thing or whether it's just something I've done with the characters. Because if you hold an object up to the mesh, then up to the wall rather, it casts a much stronger shadow. Yeah, that's not a bad idea, Woodland Knight. Yeah, let's pretend it's that. Yeah, it's just it's not consistent. I mean, some things like the pool table has, you know, a really strong, solid shadow. You know, the pool balls, they've all got shadows, and you know, I like that they have like multiple shadows being cast off of them. In fact, you know, I've mentioned this before, but I love how this looks like one of those magazine renders you'd see back in the 90s. Like, if anyone was around back in the 90s and was into computers, you'd have like a scene that looks like this with like a pool table that took like 8 hours to render. And yet, you know, here we are in the age of real-time rendering, and you know, it's able to do the shadow casting from the balls and the reflections and everything all in real time. Yeah, which is pretty amazing. It is really impressive, amazing tech, but like anything, you know, it's not without its downsides. In this case, smeary shadows. Free but smeary. I think that's how I describe megalights, actually. Great, free but smeary. And if you don't mind the smeary, then they're awesome. Anyway, what were we doing? Oh, I remember the classic kettle render. Takes me back. But yeah, it's like, back then, those kind of images would just take hours and hours to render. fluid source helium, fluid source helium-3, fluid source deuterium. Right, and then the output pipe should be pipe just call it helium-1 for now. So fluid type helium, pipe name, pipe HE1, upstream device name, fluid source helium. Yeah, and this is where it gets a little bit tedious. So that's HE1, that's HE31. Oops, no, it's... Did I put that in the wrong box? Yeah, I did. So I did set this up to spawn little brackets, but it doesn't seem to be spawning them. Oh, well, doesn't matter for now. You know, just as I change the fluid type, the bands change color, so we know which one's which. Thank you, Luck Dragon. Wow, God, the old voodoo cards, yeah. I remember those. Didn't they have like a jester on the box, if I remember rightly? Or was that the Matrox Mystique? That was like my favorite graphics card back in the 90s, the Matrox Mystique. Whatever happened to Matrox? You don't really hear of them these days. Oh, welcome, Joey. Thank you. Oh, really? Oh, interesting. So I'll call that one chiller helium 3, chiller deuterium. So the output pipe would be pipe D2. That one will be pipe HE3 2. That one will be pipe HE 2. So you can probably tell through watching this why I'm so desperate to not have to do this manually and actually have it pick up what it's connected to via overlaps, because this is so prone to human error. Alright, so the upstream device, it's going to be chiller HE. Chiller HE3. That would be chiller deuterium. So cryotank HE, cryotank HE3, cryotank D. So downstream device would be cryotank HE, cryotank HE3, cryotank D. Yeah. No worries at all. I make video games. Happy to help. So I think this might be enough to actually power the chillers and get the tanks filling. So we'll just give that a quick test. Obviously the boil off won't boil off, so they'll eventually explode, but still, we can fill them up. We do, however, need power to these devices in order to start that process going. I think for now, we will completely cheat and use one of these power cables. So we got PSU1, PSU2. I think PSU1 was utility one, so we use that one. Lost the battery room. Oh, it's under the floor there, that's what I wanted. Right, that gives them power. And similarly with these guys. Hang on, that didn't look right. Why is the power cable name a pipe name? That makes no sense. And I shall power these up as well while we are here. Right, so they should all receive power from our fake power supply for now. Just make sure that these are right. So we are going to need the refill pipe, so that'll be these ones. So refill would be HE1. Refill would be HE31. And refill would be D1. And the return pipe, which is the one that goes back to the tank. That one, so return is HE2, HE32, and D2. Right, now it should be enough there to fill the tanks. So if we save all, let's just give that a quick try. Thank you, Joey. I forgot I moved the engineering entrance, so it's not over there now. We're not loading the level, so we need to sort that out. Yeah, the loading screen was something that I've been wanting to do for a long time. And obviously the whole idea of the game is a fully simulated starship. And what better way to demonstrate that than to show the ship physically being built, as you're loading the game, so that you can really appreciate that this is a real starship, every deck, every room, every bit of hardware, and have it all present and there as it's loading. And you'll see the fuel tanks being inserted, as the ship is being built, which is very cool. Right, so we're not loading all the levels that we need to load. So let's just make sure that we are including the power. Walls, top, sheet, interior, ceilings. Right. Gonna have to start extending this. So that's deck 4 power. Deck 3 power. Just noticed actually I didn't change these ones last time I was working on this. That's what I get. Obviously, as we have more layers to the ship, we'll have to load those streaming levels accordingly. here come the errors. So these errors are normal and expected because we haven't cabled everything up yet, so it's going to complain at me until we've done that. Okay, that's probably some optimization stuff here we're not doing. Okay, so I'm probably going to have to set these visible from all decks. I don't know which one we've got set up. Again, one of the issues that we've got here is that obviously we set this up for the Magellan. So all of this stuff is kind of expecting to be on the Magellan. So we need to make everything a little bit more generic and more usable elsewhere. So all of our optimization obviously expects to be on the Magellan as well. So all these devices are like, well, hang on a minute, I don't know what deck I'm on. Right. That should hopefully make a difference. I'll have to do some Caravella specific debug teleports as well so that we can zoom around. Right, okay, so we have stuff. The screens are on, that's good, it means they're getting power. So we're getting electrical power. No data from there. Right, let's start these tanks empty. Right, we'll add a test variable here. So if we're in cold and dark or start empty is true, then we will make sure that the tanks start empty. That way we can test whether or not they're actually being filled properly. Make that instance editable so we can do it in the world. Default it to off. Right, so they now should start empty. You're not wrong, CSI. Yeah, in order to test whether the light comes on, we literally need to build the entire reactor and all of its supply systems. Because otherwise, there's no power for said light bulb. tank is empty. Fill level is 0. So we're definitely getting power. Now, it might be the case that because these devices are not fully connected up, they may not be fully initializing. So that being the case, we need... No, that is the output from there, so that's fine. So we definitely have our fluid source. D1, HE31, HE1, fluid source HE, HE3. Right, so let's sort out the return pipes then. So, oh, there's a point. Make sure we've got the pipe set to the right material, because that can't help if they're wrong. Right, so this one's going to be pipe D3. And that one will be pipe HE3, and that one will be pipe HE3. So the output pipe 1, relief, yeah, so that's D3. The fluid system is different from the electrical system because the electrical system is basically running an electrical simulation, so it's using known electrical math. The fluid system is different because fluid behaves differently to electric, so we need to deal with like knowing whether something's flowing and passing those messages back up the pipe, so the logic in the background, we're managing the flow so that if we close a valve, obviously the flow needs to stop upstream of the valve, and the only way that the upstream devices know that flow is stopped is if we then transmit messages back up the pipe to say, hang on a minute, there's a valve closed here, you need to stop sending fluid. It works very differently with the electrical simulation, so this whole loop needs to be configured before it'll work. Which would be why it was saying no data. So relief would be HE33 and relief would be HE3. And then the refill pipe would be pipe HE2, and that would be HE32, and that would be D2. So of course the output pipes are the ones that are going to the reactor, so we don't need to worry about them. Not yet, anyway. So on here we've got downstream device name would be cryo tank D. No, sorry, that's the upstream device is cryo tank D. Downstream device is the chiller. So that's chiller D. Because this is the overflow, or rather the boil off. So downstream for the boil off is chiller HE3, and then downstream would be chiller HE, and then upstream is cryotank HE, cryotank HE3, and cryotank D. Ow! My leg is being ripped to shreds by these kittens. Yeah, it's nice. Like, sometimes if I get the lighting just right, we can like nail the photorealism, and it's something that I'm absolutely keen to achieve, is to get the right lighting feel and the right, just the right amount of detail, so that when you look at it, it's that like, is this real kind of thing, just for a second. That's the ultimate goal. I have a kitten standing on the keyboard. You're not helping. I don't think you can quite see her, can you? Hang on. Say hello. Ooh, hello. She's purring like you. We're probably going to name her Acorn. I know this is weird. I name all my cats after rabbits from Watership Down. So one of my first cats years ago was called Holly, and then my next cat was called Pipkin, and then if we call this one Acorn, then we've kind of maintained consistency by naming cats after rabbits. Oh, I grew up with Watership Down. It's yeah, I guess I used to watch it loads when I was little. It's definitely sad at times, but I do love it. This is the fill valve, isn't it? Hang on. Yeah, so HE1 D1. Right, that needs to go to the chiller. That might be where we're missing something. Chiller HE3. Chiller HE. Right. So they're all correct. That's all correct. So's that. So's that. And so's that. We don't need to worry about the output. Right, so I know that one's all correct, so we'll just test that a sec. I've not seen the remake of Watership Down, so I don't know whether it's changed, but I don't remember it being about rabbits being hunted and offed. It's about a group of rabbits leaving their warren, which is being destroyed. Granted, because humans are going to human and build houses on stuff. And then dealing with rabbit politics when two warrens clash until they eventually live happily ever after. Right, the tank is filling. All three tanks are filling, so that's good. So we've got issues with those pipes. Not sure why we've got issues with those pipes, but we shall have a look. There's enough getting through that it's filling anyway, which means we've got fluid that we can send to the reactor. That is weird though. Why are they glitching? So it's definitely picking up the right pipe names. So I do wonder whether I've plugged something in wrong, because you've got pipe D2 there, but also pipe D2 there. That's not right. I've done the same here. I have. I think I've cross-piped something. Yeah, what I've always loved about Watership Down is the world building, and it's like the Lord of the Rings of rabbits. You know, they have their own language and their own culture and society, and I love how much detail's gone into the world building. Yeah, I don't know. I've never thought of it as a dark story. Obviously, you know, there is a lot of tragedy in the story, but ultimately good prevails, and that's kind of what you want from a story. Right, so the relief pipe is HE3, which is right. Refill pipe is from pipe 1. Pipe 1. Downstream is chiller. Upstream's the fluid source. Downstream's the chiller. Upstream's the fluid source, and that's HE31. So HE31 is the refill pipe. So HE32. Right, yeah, so that's the return pipe from the reactor. So, of course. Right, that's where I was going wrong, because the return pipe hasn't been added yet, and I think that's the same on all of them, isn't it? Yeah, so the output pipe is pipe 2, which is this one, and that's going to the tank. And then the boil off. So refills pipe 2, which is correct. The relief pipe is pipe 3. So relief is pipe 3, output's pipe 2, refills coming in from pipe 1. Yeah. That is as it should be. So, each tank now needs output pipe for the pump. So we have pump, deuterium, pump, helium 3, and pump helium. Right, so this would be pipe 4. The downstream device would be pump D. Upstream device is the cryo tank, that's correct. So pipe HE34. Downstream would be the pump. Upstream is the cryo tank. So pipe helium 4, downstream device would be pump helium, and then cryo tank helium. Okay. So input pipe would be pipe D4, output pipe would be pipe D5. So that would be HE34, HE35, and then HE4, oops, HE4, HE5. These down here because these are the ones that are going to the reactor. So pipe name is 5. So the upstream device is the pump and the downstream device is the reactor. I need to work out what the interfaces are on those because we want them to go obviously into the right port. So upstream is the pump, downstream is the reactor. G5. Upstream is the pump, downstream is the reactor. And then on the reactor itself, if I could find it. Where is the reactor? There it is. Obviously we need to know what interface goes where. Now hopefully I was foresighted enough to actually make a note of that. Where's the fluid? There it is. So there we go. Right, so A is helium, B is helium 3, and C is deuterium. Right, so that one rather. So reactor. So helium is A. Helium 3 is B. And then deuterium is C. Okay. Right, and then we need the return from the reactor. Which I guess I'll just keep in this room for now. So this would be pipe 6. a lot of pipe segments. We actually have more pipes than this in the actual proper build because we have valves as well. We're just skipping valves for now, just to keep it simple. Right, so upstream is reactor, reactor, and reactor. And then the downstream device would be the chiller, because this is the return from the reactor. So downstream is chiller, and it would be good point. We need to know the interface label on here because it's got 3 inputs, so we need to know which one we're using. So that's chiller HE3 and chiller HE. And then we just need to make sure we do the right cable names on here. So the return pipe is HE5, and then HE35, and then D5. Right, so that's all the pipe set up on there, but we need to know the 1, 2, and 3 of this. So I'm assuming the return is 2 or 3. Again, let's just check our fluid input. Would have been helpful if I'd labelled that like I did on a reactor. Oh no, I have got it here, of course. Right, so it's C. Return is C. Just need to make sure that these are all C accordingly. So downstream is C. Okay, and then again on the reactor, we need to know what the outputs are. So 1 is helium, 2 is helium-3, and 3 is deuterium. So reactor 3, 2, 1. Pump only has 1 output, obviously, so that's fine. Just make sure that these are correct. So the chiller output, yeah, that's probably going to need something as well, isn't it? Oh, okay, no, it only has 1 output. No, that's fine then. Right, let's give this a whirl a minute. So we should see data across all interfaces, and we should see at least some pressure on the pump. I've got a couple of cryo tanks generating errors there, so that's probably not helping. Oh, I seem to have gotten myself nicely stuck. Brilliant. Come on. There we go. So we're showing. Let's get down and have a look. Right, so pipe 3.2 is doing 100 litres per second at 20 bars of pressure, which is normal. Helium tank out is 0 bars of pressure, probably because there's nothing connected at the other end. And we're not seeing anything for the boil off at all. So okay, so we've got 100 litres per second out. We've got nothing on the boil off. We should have data coming from the refill, so we definitely have it because we've got 100 litres per second, which is what this ball is outputting. But it should say it here on the UI. So I need to investigate what's going on with that. And then yeah, no data for these, but that'll be because there's nothing on this side. I'm assuming that's true for all of them. Why can't I fit through there? So you can see here the tank pressure is rising substantially because it's not using the boil off. That's not good. I think it gets about 400 bar before exploding. Okay, so why is the boil off not working? Yeah, they're strong tanks. I looked up a COPV pressure when I was doing these. Hang on, I can tell you what it is exactly because I've got it in the code. Yeah, 700 bar is the maximum tank pressure. What are COPVs rated for? Some COPVs are rated up to 10,000 psi. What's that in bar? Which is 689 bar. Yeah, so they're 10,000 psi tanks, and they are COPVs. Just really big COPVs. that doesn't help. We haven't filled in the output pipe. So that would be... That, no, that's the return, wasn't it? So... Hang on. Did I think I might have copied rather than moved. Other way around, I think I might have moved rather than copied. That'll explain why things aren't as they seem. Right, so pipe D3 is going to chiller D, which means pipe D3 is the relief pipe. So then pipe 4, that will be 5, that's 6, yeah. Like an EJIT, I decided to move rather than copy. So we lost a pipe. Let's rotate them so we kind of know what they're for. Right, so that's the pipe coming out of the tank into the pump, and that's a pipe coming from the pump to the reactor. Right, so this would be pipe 4, which is what we're missing. Okay, the downstream device is the pump. So that's pump D. Pump HE3. Pump HE. And that would be interface A on all 3 of them. That wouldn't be the reactor, that would be cryo tank. And 1. That's another reason actually, because I think the tanks have got 2 outputs, haven't they? So yes, they've got 2 outputs, so relief pipe is on 2, which means the reason why it wasn't using the relief valve is because we didn't set the relief pipes to 2. I can hear things being destroyed behind me. I'm just not going to turn around and look. Yeah, which means those ones correctly come out of interface 1. So pipe 4, pipe 4, pipe 4, and these should be set to pipe 4. So as you can see, it's nice and straightforward. Right, so you can see our error messages are now focusing on the battery arrays, which we don't care about yet, so that's fine. So it's still moaning about no data on there. Maybe, yeah. Need to move these UIs. I can see them better. Okay, yeah, so So we're seeing outputs now on all of those, at least on the tank's perspective. So the tank is showing 100 litres a second in, which is correct, on pipe 2. We're seeing 10 litres per second on pipe 4, which is its flow rate into the pump, which is correct. So we're seeing 10 litres per second there. We're holding 20 bars of pressure. Temperature stable. And we're outputting that on this pipe towards the reactor. Obviously there's nothing on it yet, so it's just flowing into space. And we're seeing 0.1 litres per second going back into the chiller. Basically that's the boil off from the tank. I've seen the same data on that one. Same data on that one, so that's pipe 4 coming in, pipe 5 going out, pipe 4 coming in, pipe 5 going out, and then we've got pipe 2 coming in. So that, well, that's interesting, that one keeps dropping off. There might be a mislabeled pipe there. So that's 2, 4 and 3. 2, 4 and 3. 2, 4 and 3. So that's holding 100 litres per second steady, whereas this one seems to be getting polluted by that pipe. Something's cross-wired there, I think. Yeah, you can see that this tank is filling a lot more slowly than this one. Yeah, so these tanks both have 16,000 litres and this one only has 7. So there's an issue with that one. So pipe 2 is correct. 315, 315, 315. Yeah, that's all correct. I'm assuming we have 2 pipes trying to send to the same interface. So, right, so what's the refill? So refill is B. So that means these ones should be on B. Ah, right, they're not. So hang on. Let's fix that. Did I mention it was really fiddly? Right, so those 3 go onto B. Right, the relief is on A. That's you, so you should be going on to A. A, and A, so that's fine. And then the return pipe should be on C. So that's these ones. So yeah, there we go. So C, C, and C. Right, so while we're at it, let's start plumbing some of this into the reactor. Obviously it has no power right now. I think we will stick that on cable 1 just so we have power. Right, so the helium intake pipe would be HE5, and then the outflow will be HE6. So that's HE3.5, HE3.6, D5, and D6. Right, that should be all that piped up now. So on the Reactor UI, assuming it likes our power input, we should be able to see some coolant flowing through the coils. Thanks, Alex. I shall double check that then. Yeah, you're right. So that shouldn't be flicking like that. So something that has become obvious through, obviously trying to set this back up, but we need labels on here as well to make, to show that we're getting the right thing. Obviously, it's automatically picking up the pipe names, but we don't know what these things are, like which ones it expects it to be. Which is why we've got the return from the reactor is overlapping the overflow. Yeah, so HE5 is from the reactor, but it should be on this one. That's weird. That's good though. So that one's flowing, that one's flowing. That one. Right, so we fixed the refill. That's all good. We're holding 20 bars of pressure rather than 200, so that's good. It means the relief valve is working. Yeah. Well, the pipes are color coded, so we got purple, green, and blue. But it needs to be on the UIs. Now, let's check the reactor a minute. See if we have any power. No, we don't. Oh, probably an optimization deck check thing. Oh yeah, that'll be exactly what it is. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Right, that should make that visible now. Yeah, dare I look? Oh, okay, it's not too much chaos. Right, yeah, so let's just sanity check real quick. So the return pipe is C, which is these ones. So these should all definitely be going to C. Yeah, so 1, 2, 3 on the upstream, and on the downstream, they should all be going into C, which they are. So HE6, HE36, and D6. Okay. Which means on here, so the return is D6. Okay, so that doesn't help. We had the returns wrong on there. Okay. Let's just make it more obvious for ourselves that that's coming from the reactor. Right, and what was the So the relief pipe, it should be on input A. So that's this one. Right, yeah, so that was wrong, of course. So A, and A. So pipe 3 goes to interface A, which is the relief, okay, and the refill, which is pipe 1, goes to interface B, which is all 3 of these, so these should all be, they should all be on B. So pipe 1B, pipe 1B, pipe 1B. Okay. So this time, that should be it. I shall have a look. So the ones coming down diagonally should definitely be going into C because they are the refills, the returns. Yeah, there we go. So pipe 1 coming in, that's the fill pipe. So that will be coming from the refill hardware. So the fuel scoop underneath the ship, that basically pipes into pipe 1. So that's 100 litres a second coming from scooping a planet. Pipe 3, that's the boil off from the tank, so that's 0.1 litres per second. And then pipe 6, that's the 10 litres per second coming from the reactor. So this is hot used coolant coming back, or hot used fuel in this case coming back. And that should be the same on these. So boil off, fill and return, boil off, fill and return. Yeah, so that 110.1 litres per second is what we're looking for, because that's the combination of the refill from the external source, the return from the reactor being 10 litres per second, and then the 0.1 coming from the boil off from the tank. So those 3 are correct. And we should see the same values here. So 110.1, 10 litres per second out to the pump, and then 0.1 litres per second leaving through the boil off, and 10 litres per second coming from the fuel tank, and then 10 litres per second going to the reactor. And then that should be mirrored with these, which it is. Yes, yes. And yes. Okay, so fiddly as hell, but we got there in the end. So this is the full fuel and coolant loop with all the pipes that we need. Now, obviously, when we do all this properly and plumb it all in permanently, we're going to have to put valves on there as well. So obviously, when you put the valve in, you then have an additional pipe either side. So we'll have more pipes. But yeah, that should be that. And if the reactor is now visible, which is, we should be able to start seeing some stuff on there. So you've got this one, the refill. The one on the top is going to the tank, and the one on the bottom is coming from the tank. So it'll make more sense when they're actually physically connected. But essentially you've got the boil off coming from the cryogenic liquid boiling off. That comes through this pipe, back into the chiller, and then goes back out into the tank again. So this big one, well actually this big one is what in actual fact the one coming from the fuel scoop, and the output's going to be on this side, but we're missing the geometry at the moment. So you need essentially 4 pipes per chiller. 3 of them are coming in, and then the one big one coming out, which goes to the tank. We're just missing, as I say, we're missing the geometry for that. So I'm just stacking them there. Yeah, and that will be this one. Right, so the next question is, why is the reactor not turning on? So we should have at least just a UI there, just to see what's going on. And do we have any clues here? No, it's not. The reactor's not complaining about cables or anything, so... what's going on there? Let's just move that up so we can see it better. No, there are no startup capacitors, but we do have this cable, cable 1, which is our test cable that we're using for all of these. And we'll just make sure that I have actually spelt it correctly. Yeah, so... Actually... I think what might be happening is so there are 2 types of cable that we model in the game. These ones are end cables, so I think I have a tick box on that somewhere, but end supply, there we go. So the end supply isn't trying to send anything beyond itself, it's just holding voltage. And then things like lights all connect to it. So basically it's assuming it's the end of the run, and it's just waiting for lots of lights to tell them their voltages and amperages. If we untick this, which I think what this one is, so this one specifically, this one is powering something directly, which means it's plugged into something. So that one's not plugged into anything other than like lights and stuff. That one is directly plugged into something, which means it requires the downstream device name. So what we actually need to do in order for this to work, we need to make a copy of that one. We will call this cable 3. And the downstream device name is Reactor. And that should be interface A. So on the reactor, we need to make sure that we do cable 2 on interface A, which is the start capacitor. And then we'll worry about outputs after that, but that should do it, because now, as far as the game's concerned, although physically they're miles apart, this cable is now plugged directly into the reactor, and is being powered by our fake reactor. Yeah, so let's try that. Yeah, well, we use start capacitors, so basically once the reactor is running, it self-charges backup power, which has enough energy to restart the reactor should it fail. So you could probably restart the reactor 12 times on a single capacitor charge. Oh, good night CSI, have a good one. Ah, where's my UI? Hang on, let's change our spawn location to there, just to save having to run around every time. Let's just add a sphere. Right, so on our player controller, when we start a new game, obviously we then spawn our character. Which is this is all a bit experimental at the moment, which is why it's not all nicely commented. But if we are using the Caravella, there we go. Just need to change that. So we'll grab the XYZ from that, pop it in there, so that we spawn next to the reactor each time, rather than having to run all the way down to check. Oh, it's cable 3. That might be something to do with it. Yeah, that's the thing with fusion reactors. They don't explode. In order for a fusion reactor to work and do fusion, like the conditions need to be so perfect and so well balanced and so controlled that any slight deviation in perfection, the fusion reaction will just stop working. So you can't blow up a fusion reactor because they're so twitchy. They the slightest imperfection in parameters and they just turn off and stop working, and then you've just got a bunch of hot plasma swirling around that isn't fusing. I think the worst thing that could happen with a fusion reactor is you could have like a chamber break maybe and flood hot plasma into the area, but even then it would be for like a second and then it'll be gone. So yeah, I don't think there's any inherent risk from fusion reactors. Yeah. So the way we're going to manage failure states with these is, if you overcook the reactor and you're ploughing more and more power into the system to try and get more and more power out, then you're heating up the coils. And of course, those magnetic coils need to be at superconducting temperatures in order to properly manage the fusion reaction. If you heat the coils up too much, then they're no longer capable of containing that fusion to the point it needs to be contained to achieve. So contain the plasma enough to achieve fusion. So then fusion will just stop and the reactor will shut down. So what you're really doing is managing those coil temperatures to make sure they don't get too hot. Still doesn't explain why that doesn't turn on though. I think it might be time for some debugs. So cable 3, so the device name is Reactor. Cable 3 is, from the start capacitors, so cable 3. Let's add a cable 4 as well. And just add that underneath. So reactor input port B is cable 4, and we'll stick that on PSU 1 just for the hell of it. So upstream 1. Oh, that might be an issue actually. it might be the case that because this is a test thing, there's only one output, so let's put PSU3 into cable 3. And get rid of cable 4 a minute. So PSU3. Okay, let's try that. Ah, haha. We have power. Right. So our coils should be good. We switch it to startup, start purging the chamber. Why is it already purged? Oh, weird. Oh, because we're not in cold and dark, so yeah, it would have had some settings already. So yeah, that's going to need resetting. Interesting. So we seem to have some temperature issues. So it's yeah, I don't know why that button's turning off though, because that shouldn't be turning off. Yeah, let's turn the coils off. Yeah, so it makes sense that the on button would be turning off because obviously if the temperature's too high it shouldn't be on, but the off button should only be grayed out if it's already off. So that's correctly saying field coils offline. So oh, we had a second of fusion there before it died. I think it's a temperature issue. See, and this is the problem with fusion reactors. Unless the conditions are perfect, it will not stay running. And YouTube's crashed again. So, so I'm just checking the pipes a minute. So HE5 coming in, HE6 coming out. So that's correct. That's what we configured. And then we got deuterium 5, helium 3.5, deuterium 6, helium 3.6. So that's all good as well. And the deuterium 1 is also going to the neutral beam injectors. So that's correct. So the right pipes are in the right place. Yeah, so it's definitely starting and stopping. Okay. Oh, thank you, Rob. Very much appreciated. You join us at a time of great confusion. See, you know it's bad when I literally built all of this. I coded all of this from scratch, and it's even confusing me. Like, why won't it work? Why are we moaning about temperatures? Yeah, well, I don't think we configured it to complain about temperatures that are that high, or that low rather. Where's the reactor tick? So part of the problem might be that we're not starting in cold and dark mode. So half of it thinks it's on and the other half thinks it's off. So I'm sure there's some of that happening. Yeah, so that's just room temperature, so we don't need to worry about that. That's not our warning. So the warnings are going to be down here, aren't they? So yeah, so we're looking at lower than 20. And then we're just killing the reactor. So can we chill it down some more? See, they're configured for, let's configure them for 15 a minute. Let's chill them down a bit more, because it could be as simple as the chillers are running too hot. I need to go back on the Magellan and check what I've configured those for. But if the shutdown is 20 and we're giving it 20, then we're not giving it much room for maneuver. Right, so start that up. That's already running, so let's watch that chill down. Hey, Danger Mouse. So I think what we're seeing actually is a bug in that the reactor was already online because we hadn't configured it to not be, which means the field cores were already online. So it was trying to shut down the reactor, but it wasn't turning the coils off, which is why the button was flashing. So I'll look into that, because that just looks like a normal bug. But we have fusion. Why have we suddenly lost our flow? Oh, I know why. It's because we're supposed to be sending double the amount of deuterium. Because there should be 2 deuterium tanks ordinarily, because we're obviously having to power the neutral beam injectors with deuterium as well. Which means we've got a negative number there. So this is another bug, and we're discovering flaws in the system doing this. So if we're not giving it enough flow rate, obviously we get a negative flow rate, but it's not shutting down, because as far as it's concerned, it's getting enough flow rate in. it doesn't care that it's outputting a negative amount of liters per second. So we just need to make sure that we work out how much we need before we deduct that value. And obviously if that goes below 0, then there's not enough fuel and it shuts down, because that should be capped at 0. We're still grabbing temp warnings for that, so let's cool it down even more and up the flow rate on the pump. Right, let's pop you guys at, where are we? So take you down to 10 Kelvin, and pump, or the deuterium specifically, needs a flow rate of 20. Okay. If you mean the chillers, yeah, they're modeled on a real world thing. I need to check the reactor actually to see what kind of temperatures it's expecting, because it still thinks that that's high, but it's obviously high but usable. Right, so we should now get, oh yeah, so if we turn the reactor up, obviously we start using more fuel. Yeah, so we got we're using 20 liters per second, and we've got 1.8 liters per second left over, so we're slightly underutilizing. Go up to 110. That takes us to exactly, so basically we're using every single last drop of fuel coming into it. Right, so we'll ignore the errors for now. See if I can find, it's a long time since I found one. Go away, Windows. Oh, I found one. There you go. One of them. So that's a real world version of what we're using. They're like Stirling coolers, but the motor spins a shaft and there's magnets and things in there. But we're using magnetic refrigeration, so ours works a little bit differently than this, but it's able to chill all the way down to, like, single digit Kelvin, which is very cool. Ah, thank you, Festus. Yeah, we wanted to real world it as much as possible. All the tech should be, you know, either exactly real world tech or at least analogous to real world tech. So obviously we can change in the editor just how cold these chillers get. We want to chill them down like via the UI, so we want to add a UI element on here so you can actually configure directly on the device how cold they output their fluids. Yeah, probably, Alex, that'd be quite cool. Yeah, there's this obviously boiling point of certain liquids is a factor here. So boiling point of helium-4 in Kelvin. 4.2 Kelvin. So atmospheric pressure, if we go over 4.2 Kelvin, then our helium coolant will start gassing out. Deuterium. Deuterium can cope with up to 20 Kelvin. So that's why I set the alarm at 5. That makes sense. Which means that the helium ones both need to be set much, much colder. Like 3 or something. And then this one's fine at 10. There you go. It's all coming back to me now. Okay. Right. Well, now we've got that working. Yay. We can power a fusion reactor, so that's good. So the next thing we need to do is we need to start charging the battery arrays from the fusion reactor. So we need multiple outputs leading to multiple devices. Probably not Woodland Knights. I think we need to draw a line somewhere with, you know, with how deep the simulation goes. I think modeling the temperature at which something changes from liquid to gas, yes, we'll certainly keep an eye on that. That's something which is kind of fundamental to the behavior of the fluid. But yeah, when we're talking things like pressures and yeah, and like, you know, can you pump more coolant if it's colder? I think that's probably a little bit too deep down the rabbit hole. I know we've gone pretty deep down the rabbit hole, but that's probably too deep. We'll definitely have wear and tear on the coils based on their operating temperatures. So again, we need superconductivity in the magnets in order to maintain fusion, and if you're constantly running them hot, then you'll be wearing the coils out a lot quicker. So we'll do wear and tear in that regard, but probably not at a fluid dynamics level. I think fluid dynamics is where we draw the line, because then you're getting into proper fluid simulation, and we don't want to do that. Yeah, so I think we'll limit our fluid simulation at pressure and temperature, and leave it at that. I think that's probably more than enough, you know, for the scope of the game. Okay, So we now need to add more outputs from the reactor. Right, so we've got a fluid delivery there, we've got a fluid output there. So that's our fluid side done. We don't need to care about that anymore. Right, so we've got voltage delivery. Oh, interesting. So I've just fixed a bug in my head. One of the things we have at the moment is that the reactor will turn off its screen if you don't have the startup capacitors turned on. And it's because we don't have input B on here. Interesting. I need to come back and look at that. Blah, 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 blah. Right, so we're going to need multiple cables sending out our electrical packets. So that's replication stuff. Okay, so we'll need to add a bunch of additional interfaces here when we change from startup to supply, because obviously we need to enable all the other cables that we're outputting, and we need those available not just for this ship but for all future ships. So that needs to expand. Yeah. Interesting suggestion, Danger Mouse. Yeah. Yeah, we got quite a lot done in 24 hours of stream time. So yes, that's definitely a good suggestion. Or yes, shuttles, that's another good suggestion. I mean, we do need to start actually having flyable shuttles at some point, and we can't keep using our really stupid, goofy shuttle model, which is this, for anyone that hasn't seen it yet. It's really, really pathetic test mesh. So, yes, it would be good to model that properly, like with an interior and everything, and start working on that. I love your optimism, Danger Mouse, but no, it will take me longer than 24 hours. Because we need to design it, model it, do the hardware. Because, you know, as much as we are, you know, building the reactor and the coolant systems and stuff for this ship. Oh, that was close. I nearly had a tube of Pringles in my computer then. Along with the cat that pushed it. Yes, so all the stuff you see here needs to be miniaturized for this. So we need a little power plant, some fuel and coolant, and you know, this needs its own little reactor. So we need a miniaturized fusion plant for our shuttles. So yeah, so scale wise, we need to fit that in. Along with, you know, the thruster hardware, the RCS hardware, and all the rest of it. So, yeah, shuttles are going to be quite big. But yeah, I think that's probably a decent challenge for a 24-hour stream, and it gives us something to work on for actual shuttle flight as well. Yeah, one of the things I want to get to at some point is that when you board a ship or start a game, you just arrive in the shuttle bay. I think that's a nice way of, you know, boarding ships. I currently have a kitten drinking my shrimp water. They do have water down in a bowl, but they seem to prefer water from the shrimp tank. The moon buggy will be battery powered, and that's the other possible thing for the shuttles, is we might actually, rather than having a full reactor, at least on the small ones, have just have really big batteries, so that the shuttles themselves are battery powered along with the ground vehicles, and you charge them up on your ship and then send them on their way fully charged. They don't have FTL or anything, so they don't need a huge amount of power. Yeah, something like that. I mean, I think for the little shuttle, we definitely don't have room for a reactor. I think for the bigger shuttles, then yeah, we can look at sticking a reactor in them and making them a little bit more self-sufficient. Right, yeah, so reactor, we need more outputs, which means we need all of these functions duplicated and all that. Depends. I mean, yes, I mean, we could have shuttles that have limited offensive capability and shields. So obviously the shield capacitors draw from the main battery bank, the weapons draw from the main battery bank, and every time you fire the weapon, you're depleting the shuttle's energy to the point where if you just keep firing the weapons, the shuttle will be drained dry, and then you'll have no power left for navigation. That could be a balancing act that we do. All that said, we're not going to have offensive weaponry on the transport shuttles. They're literally just vehicles for getting from A to B. They don't need weaponry, and it's kind of pointless to have weaponry on them because they're so small and flimsy that any kind of firefight would immediately result in their destruction. So we'll have a shield, but no offensive weaponry, at least not on the small ones. Yeah, we'll definitely have solar panels that can be deployed for recharging, and the same on the main ship as well. We'll have a solar backup power. So it looks like I started making a second interface on this, and then didn't continue. So basically, we need all of this duplicated, along with all of the associated functions for each interface that we add, which is no small task. So interface to cable ID, stick that down there. Interface to enabled, state. Yes. Hang on, where did that interface 0 come from? What are you used for? Ah, right, yes. So that's what, yeah, that's isolating. Okay, that makes sense. Oh, we're using that for the UI, aren't we? Yeah. Okay. So. Okay, so we don't need to care about the UI with the other interfaces, because we're daisy chaining them all off of whether or not we're in supply or not. So we only actually need cable ID, whether it's enabled, the output wattage. Yep, so we're going to have to make a whole bunch of new rep notify functions for this lot. Whether or not it's actually plugged in. We need to know what device it's plugged into. I feel your pain, Max. So, voltage. So ID enabled, state we don't care about because that's for the UI. So state, wattage, connected, actor, plugged in, test, and voltage. Assuming there's no usage for that. It's interesting, these variables are behaving like they don't exist. Which makes me assume that this isn't used for anything, otherwise, oh yeah, otherwise it would be complaining like hell. Okay. Right, so that's just the management tick, so that's not actually what's coming out of the reactor. It's been such a long time since I wrote all this that I've completely forgotten how it works. And this is why we comment things. Can you imagine if none of this was commented? And yeah, how difficult that would be. Right, yeah, so that's just basically setting everything for cold and dark. That's just our optimization stuff. That's all the replication stuff for buttons. Yeah, so really it's what's happening here. So that's just a bunch of UI stuff. So what are we actually querying that with? Ah, there we go. So Reactor delivery tick. So we need to give it voltage delivery for every new interface that we add to the reactor. So I don't think a lot of this is going to be needed. Let's duplicate it. Okay, so basically we need to do this for every single interface now. So we'll replace that with interface 2 enabled. Interface 2 enabled. That's just the reactor, so that's fine. That's fine. And then we want downstream cable 2 actor. And then we'll just send our voltage. Wommy, wow, thank you. I'm sure you get this all the time, but I'm trying to get into game development and it all seems so overwhelming. Do you think I should buy one of those courses people offer to learn better or just experiment? Love your game, keep it up. Thank you. Very much appreciated. As a self-taught developer, I would absolutely wholeheartedly recommend, first of all, YouTube videos. There are a lot of really good tutorials on YouTube, which are free and don't require signing up for anything. You'll learn a lot from those. There's a lot of free assets and bits of code on Fab, which is Epic's new store. I'm assuming you're doing Unreal Engine, of course. If you're not doing Unreal, then similar probably exists for Unity or whatever else. I learned the most by looking at what other people had done. So, like when I first started off in PHP, I would just download loads of examples of PHP and what people were using it for. And I learned just by going through other people's code and just seeing how they did stuff. So I definitely recommend downloading free plugins, free assets, and going through them and using them as learning material. Like, even to this day, I'll buy a plugin from Fab, or what was the Epic store, just for the sole purpose of learning from it. And then I'll then expand upon what that plugin did, or most likely in as it usually goes, I will rip the plugin apart completely, and make my own version of it that's proprietary to what I need. And I find, and this might just be me personally, I learn best by just experimenting and looking at what other people have done. Sometimes you learn bad ways of doing things because the person you're learning from might not necessarily have done it the most efficient way. But those are things you just learn over time. But yeah, I say absolutely start off with some introductory courses on YouTube. Literally just search for tutorials for UE5 and people will teach you stuff. The UE5 starter content now has been greatly expanded, and there's a lot of example projects you can download. Epic's learning resources are actually really good. So yeah, download example projects, see how they work, pick through the code, watch YouTube videos, and I think you'll get more out of a course if you decide to go that way eventually, if you know something already. I find that a lot of courses kind of assume a certain knowledge level rather than being like super basic. So it's better to just take your own time, learn at your own speed from YouTube, and then go into a course with like a more than a basic skill level so that you understand more what the course is teaching you. But yeah, that's what I did, and it worked for me. Yeah, PHP is PHP. It is what it is. Oh, very funny. I just got your joke. Hyperfixer, thank you. That's really good to hear. Hey, astronauts. Yeah, so the Caravella class we started, well, I guess 28 weeks ago, because we're on part 28. Or are we on 29 now? Can't remember now. And it's something that I've just been doing for 4 hours on a Sunday. So I'm not touching it like during the week, during the normal working day. But on a Sunday evening, it's nice to just work on, something new. We need another ship for launch when we go into early access, because we want to have like a Founders Edition version of the game, which is paid for and has extra stuff in it to help support the studio. So we'll still have the free version of the game, which will be what it's always going to be, which is the full procedural galaxy and everything, and all the backer ships. But then for people that want to support the studio, we want to offer a Founders Edition, which will include the Caravella, some cosmetic stuff, and whatever else we decide to throw in. So that's what that's for. But beyond that, I also needed a test bed that loaded quickly so that we can test out all the new systems we're building, like the RCS thrusters, all the sublight stuff, on something that loads quickly in the engine and doesn't like take 5 minutes between builds and everything. It's just if you're rapidly iterating on a system, it's nice to have a really small test map that you can load and unload really, really quickly. Like the Caravella loads in seconds compared to the Magellan class. So it's nice to have a really small ship to work on. And because it's so small, we should get it finished probably long before the Magellan's ever finished. And it'll be nice to have a finished ship. So yeah, lots of reasons for doing it. Yeah, we're looking at Christmas next year for early access. Obviously, the to-do list runneth long, and timescales runneth over, which is that's the nature of game dev, isn't it? Things always take longer than you want them to. But yeah, we'll try and get early access done by Christmas next year, and our line in the sand for early access is basically the full spectrum of our vertical slice implemented at a basic level. So we'll have basic shuttle flight, we'll have planetary surfaces that are done at least in a basic way, we'll have an NPC crew that's working at least in a basic way, we'll have other aliens you can speak to and shoot at in a basic way. So as long as everything is implemented at least in a basic way, then we'll feel that, okay, we're now ready to move out of alpha and into like out of early alpha and into like proper alpha. Because right now I still class the game as like pre-alpha. And early access is going to be us moving into alpha properly, where we've got that full vertical slice, and from that point, rather than constantly implementing new stuff, we are optimizing and refining and adding to the vertical slice we already have, where we don't need to add anything new, we just need to expand on what we already have. So that's the line in the sand. Hopefully we'll get there by Christmas next year. But I'd say don't hold your breath, because game dev be game dev. Yeah, the Caravella's tiny though. I mean, the Magellan is massive, and as Claire pointed out, we rebuilt the entire galaxy in that time as well. So it's, a lot of the work I do during the week, in fact, I'd say all of the work I do during the week, has nothing to do with the Magellan class specifically. We're not progressing the Magellan class because we're building systems for the game itself. For the past 2 weeks, I've been doing nothing but bug fixing, and none of that is progressing the Magellan or any other ship. So when we actually, if I was to start working on the Caravella, in earnest during the week, I'd get loads done. I mean, hang on, let's grab the calculator a minute. So to get to the point we're at, that's 29 times 4 hours. So far we've spent 116 hours on this ship, which is only 4.83 days. Which is not bad, really, to get where we are in that amount of time. In fact, if we do 29 times 4, if we divide that by 8 hours, so assume an 80-hour day, so that's 2 weeks. So it's taken us, in terms of an 8-hour working day, it's only taken 2 weeks to get to where we are with this particular ship. And we have a ship. Obviously, it still needs a lot of work, it still needs a lot of modelling, but we're quite far into the design process already, and it's only been 2 weeks of work. So, add another 2 weeks of work, and we'll be that much further along. But yeah, building ships does take time, but that's why we enjoy it. It's good fun. Speaking of which, Firstus, something Claire reminded me is I need to set up the SQL database of Rear Admiral Steam IDs so that we can grant access to stuff. So anyone that's got the lifetime content pass, we need to get that sorted so you can have access to the Caravella. But I'll probably hold off until it's flyable, so you can actually use it. I mean, it's almost there. So we'll focus on the next Caravella streams. We'll focus on making the ship usable. So we'll get the helm working, we'll get the holo display working, we'll make sure the sensors work, we'll get everything powered properly. So we're starting to turn this into a usable ship now. At that point, I see no reason not to start opening it up for lifetime content pass holders. It's still going to be ugly for a while, but at least it's flyable. At the moment, we're not taking submissions for ships, but we will be. So we've got 12 vessels that we have to build from Kickstarter. So obviously we've got 12 backers and there are 12 ships that need to be built. So once we've built those 12 ships, then we'll open up submissions again for our next backer ship. And we'll probably do that via an auction or something. I can't think of a more fair way to do it, because obviously everyone's going to jump on that wanting a custom ship built. But the only way I can think of picking which one we build is to do some kind of an auction. Plus it helps the studio, which is always a good thing. But yeah, so the ship production order is going to be, we'll finish the Caravella while still working on the Magellan. When the Caravella's done, we'll then move on to the Admiral's yacht. And when the Admiral's yacht's done, we'll then move on to the backer ships, in the order of people who backed on Kickstarter. So if memory serves, I think it's Dave Soft's ship first, and then we'll do, basically we'll work from lowest Kickstarter ID upwards and build them in that order. So to be honest, if you were like the last person to back on Kickstarter, then your ship will probably be best, because I would have refined the technique by the time we get there. But yeah, we'll see. There was a Kickstarter almost 2 years ago now. I mean, it's been almost 2 years since Kickstarter. That's crazy. It's just like it's gone by in the blink of an eye. So human ships, at least to begin with, will have the FTL rings. When we move on to the Pathfinder class, which is like a bigger, sexier version of the Magellan, we're going to do away with the ring idea and have 2 arcs instead, either side of the ship. So we're basically going to chop the top and bottom of the ring off to streamline the design. And like our explanation for that in the game's lore is that obviously we've refined that hardware, and we've worked out that in order to create the field, you don't need a whole ring. Just some ring is enough to form the shape of the field, which means we can make flatter, nicer, more streamlined ship designs. Yeah, Dave's ship is kind of like a cargo hauler, if I recall correctly. It's going to have lots of cargo containers and such on it. And it's worth pointing out, actually, that obviously the various backer ships that we'll be building, they're going to have various like functionality and purpose. And obviously one of the experiments, the thought experiments we went through with this ship, is doing the mission brief for this vessel, and then defining what interior is needed in order for it to fit its mission profile. So we'll do the same thing for the backer ships, which means not all of them are going to be relevant at this point in the game's life cycle. So like Dave's cargo hauler, we don't have cargo yet. We don't have anything to trade yet. So his cargo hauler, as nice as it will be and as capable as it will be as an FTL vessel, you won't be able to fill up those cargo holds with anything anytime soon. So there'll be like military vessels and things, and they're not going to be equipped for long-term space exploration. So we might have to look at some kind of modular approach to this, so that using Dave's ship as an example, we can replace maybe some of that cargo capability with like a hydroponics, so that you can still use that ship for exploring the galaxy without the crew starving to death. Because by default, obviously, it's just a cargo ship. It's not going to have all the infrastructure that's needed for long-term exploration of space, which is the downside of building these ships as though they were real. Because obviously, because we're doing it as if they're real, the infrastructure they have and the crew support they have fits their mission profile. So not every ship is going to be capable of long distance exploration, but we'll go through that, and we'll refine, and we'll balance that as we go. But yeah, it's just it's an interesting challenge for the future. Yeah, we'll start sharing the backer ships designs as they're more fleshed out. One of our backers, Kyle, has done some 3D mock-ups of some of the ships, if not all of them already. But they still need to go through like further design and tech checks and making sure that they fit the universe and all that sort of thing. Yeah, we don't like to hold things behind closed doors. And we've always been a very, very open studio. I mean, literally just live streaming everything we do. You can't get more open than that. So yeah, as soon as something is there to be shown, we will show it. We won't, hold things. in a way in secret. We don't keep things secret, we just show you guys. Yeah, sure, Hyperfixer, definitely. No, all good. We're always interested in new designs and interesting stuff. That's what I say, you know, we're all space geeks here, we're all sci-fi fans, so yeah, you know, we congregate because we all love the same thing, so we have no problem with people sharing their stuff. In fact, if you go onto our Discord, we've got a showcase your work channel, so you know, feel free to post anything you want there, you know, stuff you're working on, stuff you've made. You know, feel free to share it with the community, because that's what we do. Sharing is caring. And on that happy note, I'm sorry to say that is time for the stream. So I shall be heading off. Just trying to think of our plans for the week. I have this nasty habit of announcing the next stream, forgetting that Claire has booked something. So I don't think we have anything booked during the week that I need to be aware of. So I should be back on Wednesday for more Magellan class stuff, probably more cabling and infrastructure, and then back on Friday for more random stuff. And I imagine Friday is probably going to be more planetary landing stuff, because I'm enjoying that. Okay, so have a good week, everyone, and I shall see you on Wednesday. Bye for now.